This is the Crappie Connection, brought to you by Redneck Rubber, Power Crappie, Visit Ridgeland, B&M Poles, K9 Fishing, Cornfield Fishing Gear, Bobby Garland Baits, Genco Fishing, Denali Rods, The Direction TV, Top Hat Jigs, Crappie Magnet, Anderson Minnow Farm,
Hook and Bullet Purpose-Built Optics.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back at the Crappie Expo 2022. I got old Todd
Huckabee
at the end here. I got two other guys with me. Introduce yourself, kind of tell us where you're from, and we'll kick off the headline of the show.
Clint Pipes from Clinton, Missouri, Truman Lake.
Truman Lake.
Hi, Joe Partenza from Monticello, Georgia, also known as the Crappie Ninja.
The AKA Crappie Ninjas on board. We're gonna do some kung fu, and actually I want to dig in and shooting docks and shooting jigs. I want somebody out there to kind of understand what does that really mean. I know it's a loaded question, and I know it's a lot to that, but let's start out with basics, and we'll even dive further in there.
Well, I'm from the southeast, and over there we shoot the jigs up underneath docks, okay, to try to catch those fish that are locked down up underneath those docks. Be it they have a little structure around them, they're near a ledge where they use that as a hiding spot. A lot of crappie are prey to stripers and big bass and stuff like that. So I think they hide underneath there, and that's the reason why they're under there. But shooting a dock, okay, is when you take a rod and you bend it back, okay, and you sort of slingshot it up underneath the dock, okay. You have to pull it back. I can demonstrate it later, but you have to pull it back, and you let go of the jig, and then a split second later, you let go of the line so that it shoots straight out and gets up underneath those docks.
Do you find a particular time of year that's better than other times of the year to actually shoot docks?
Sure. In the springtime, it's great because those fish move in shallower. They come up underneath there and hide, and they'll spawn underneath there, and they'll do their thing under there. And those big fish get up underneath there in the springtime, depending on which lake, which region you're in, and stuff like that. But I catch fish year round. There'll be certain docks that are in deeper water, okay, that will hold fish year round, okay, and if they're in the right area and there's structure there and things like that, But yeah, I can catch them year round. But of course, they're bigger and more fun in the springtime when they're loaded with eggs,
Oh yeah. Well, what about do you find that piers or docks, what have you, are better than the others because of structure, or is the actual pier just enough structure to hold fish?
Well, it's strange to me, okay, because you'll have a line of docks down a bank, okay, and certain docks hold fish and certain ones don't, and I'm not completely sure of the reason. I think it's because they're close to deep water, okay, and they do have some kind of the post themselves under a dock or is structure. Right. It's just like fishing timber. You know what I mean? I mean that they hide under there. Now, something that I learned through forward fishing, okay, is you can look underneath there before you start shooting the dock to see if there's fish under there. So you can find them like that, or you can side scan and find them that way. But what you find out, and what I used to teach people, because I guided for a while, shooting docks, what I used to teach people is when you shoot up underneath there, look for the darkest spot underneath that dock, and that's where them fish are going to be. Well, Then you get the live scope, okay, and you look up underneath there, and they're on the front post in front of the dock, and they're here, this, that, and the other. So that myth is gone away in my book, okay. But yeah, it's just a fun way to catch fish, and it's quick action. So that's why I love fishing for docks.
What about boats? I mean, is there a particular boat that you would consider best to fish out of when you're a heavy dock shooting lake or what have you? Or?
Yes. There's docks that are called stick steers, okay? And you sit down in there, so you're lower to the water level, okay? So it makes it easier to shoot the dock, you know? So if you're sitting down in a chair and you're down in a boat, okay? You know, it doesn't have a platform on it like bass boats and things like that. You're lower and it's easier to shoot up underneath the dock, okay? Can you shoot with a bass boat? Of course you can. You know, it's just a different angle. So your angle is going down like this because you're up higher instead of level, you know? So it makes it easier to shoot the dock when you're lower in a boat.
Yeah, a few years ago, whenever we was over at Hamilton and everybody was trying to shoot docks that doesn't know how,
right?
I heard so many people say, "Dude, I never knew. I did so many squats yesterday. My butt's sore from doing squats because we're all standing on a platform,
right?
And we figured out real quick that standing up doing that high was a disaster,
right?
So then you're kneeling down, and then as soon as you make the shot, then you want to stand back up because the crouching hurts. So yeah, I can see being down low in a boat would definitely having its advantage.
Well, when you're in a situation where you're on a bass boat and you're doing it, instead of squatting down like you said, well, of course, the way I scope, okay, I have a double seat in the front, okay, so I'm actually sitting down already, you know. So my situation isn't like that, you know what I mean? I'm not getting up and down. Although in this last tournament, I got down in the boat, you know what I mean, and got some shots because I moved around because he was holding the boat in place so I could shoot some docks to find out where the fish were and stuff. But if you're standing up, then all you do is you drop the rod down here instead of having it up here. You know what I mean? You drop the rod down here and you're shooting it like this. So you can do it. You can do it standing up on a platform, and it just takes a little time and practice to get it in there. So,
and if you were listening at that, and I know the YouTube guys can see that, but what he was actually doing was standing up and holding the rod waist level or below.
Right.
Thigh level, I guess you would say.
Right.
And shooting them hip, kind of like a six-shooter.
Right.
Shooting them, pulling gunslinging it.
Right.
I know some other guys that shoot some docks, and they actually wear rubber boots, sit over the side of the bass boat, sit down on the side, hang their feet in the water, and shoot them that way.
I ain't seen that before.
That's pretty brave.
That's funny.
That's pretty brave. Yeah.
So Joe, we've sat here and talked about shooting docks, but that's not the only application for this.
Oh no. I've evolved with the scope and open water fish and timber and things like that. It's a real advantage to shoot it out there to those fish because number one, like we were talking about earlier, you're underneath that wind, okay, and you don't get that float like you do when you're casting. You know, you get that. You'll have to guess how the wind's doing, just like you're shooting a deer or something like that.
And it's also a lot quieter approach into the water.
Sure. Yeah, it is.
Because when you're casting, you know your jig's gonna hit.
Right.
And as we know, them fish can definitely hear that.
Right, but accuracy is the main thing, okay? You get real accurate when you're shooting, all right? Because you got to get it, I shoot in between boards like this, okay? And pull fish out. Well, let me tell you what I do. If it's got to be where when I get the fish up to the board, okay, he's got to be able to lay on his side, okay, and fit through it. So if it's skinnier than that, I'm not going to shoot it in there because I can't get the fish out, you know? So you've got to have it thick enough and depending on where you're at and how big the fish are and stuff like that. I mean, normally if it's about like that. So I'll shoot it through boards like that, okay? Because it's real dark in those. When a dock's boarded up like that, it's darker and it's better. Those fish are they're in there better. And a lot of people can't shoot it through there like that, okay? And so there's more fish in there because they're not getting caught. You know what I mean? So I like to shoot it with the boards on there for the shade. because when you're fishing a dock, okay, you're looking for darkness underneath the dock, okay? If the sun's rising up over here and your dock's over here, then in the morning when the sun's rising up, that light penetration is going up underneath there, okay, and it moves the fish out, or they're hiding behind wood, or, the posts and things like that. When the sun gets up and it gets up dark underneath the dock, then they'll come out from where they're at around the dock, and they'll move back under and get in that dark spot.
Have you ever seen, especially now live sonar, if you hit that dock, does it scare the fish at all?
No, it actually wakes them up. I talked to him about that yesterday, because a lot of these floating docks out here, okay, it'll go back for a ways, and then they have one of them black floats in there, okay? So I'll shoot it back there all the way and hit that on purpose. A friend of mine named Richard Malcolm, okay, the jig slinger, he taught me a long time ago that if you hit a dock, it'll spook, those fish will jump, but then they'll look and they'll look around, they'll see what's going on, and then you put that jig in front of them, and they'll hit it.
What about like when somebody walks out on the pier? Does it typically, have you seen that spooks a fish, or does it the same thing? Does it wake them up?
No, I mean, if they continue to make noise, okay, it will spook the fish. I've got a guy that doesn't like me. This is a long time ago, but it's a funny story. I had a guy that didn't like me shooting up underneath the dock catching his fish. He had it all brushed out in front of it, and he didn't like it. So he had come down there. He'd act like he was doing something with his pontoon boat. He'd drop it in the water and act like he was just running it for a minute. And if that didn't work, if that didn't scare me away, then he'd get out there, and he had a bench sitting out on the thing, and he'd come out there with a hammer and start beating on the hammer. Yeah, he'd start beating on the hammer until they leave, until the fish come out from underneath the dock. But then I'll just catch him on the structure out in front of his dock, so he quit doing it after a while.
I've seen so many videos with people that
dock aggression.
Yeah, for sure. That, I guess that's, and it's silly to me. I have a dock on Lake Washington, and I love watching people come by and fish. So I love it. That's entertaining me when I'm sitting out drinking a coffee or a cold one or what have you, is watching somebody else fish. But I've seen people, and Lake Hamilton, I've got my own horror.
That was so funny.
Oh, I've got my own horror stories when it comes to shooting docks, and I'm not a dock shooter. I mean, I like doing it. I think it's very entertaining, and it's just where I'm at. I don't have a lot of application for it. But people can get quite aggressive when it comes to getting near their peers and their fish, and that's kind of the misconception, as my mind is. That's everybody's fish.
They don't realize how fast those fish reload.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can catch them under. I can go and see 20 fish under there and catch 10 of them, and come back the next day and there'll be 20 under there again. So they reload like hourly, I think.
Now, you've been in the boat with the Ninja here this week. What are some of the things that you think that you didn't realize about this technique that you have now?
Probably how it's not that complicated to shoot a dock. Mm-hmm. That if you got coordination, release that jig in that line, like he said, release jig, split second later, release that line. Man, your jig, wherever that rod's aiming, you got that line level.
Yeah.
It'll shoot right up in there. Yeah, every once in a while, I had a few flaws that released the line, too quick, and it didn't go very far. You reel it back up and shoot it out there. I was big in using 13-foot pole.
Right.
But the older I get, which I'm not that old, but the older I
shoulder
get,
and everything
my
else.
shoulder
Yeah.
gets sore just holding that thing all day. Shoot, I sat there up in front of the boat with him all week long. I picked up a long rod one time. Picked up an 18-footer for about 5 minutes, trying to get to a dock where we thought the fish was, and there's a boat in the way. And he shot in it a few times and got a bite. Well, then the jig about bit his hand, and
I got hung on the dock, and I tried to break it. And that sucker shot me, man, like a pellet gun.
So he said, put that 18-foot rod together and see if you can get in there and get one. They wouldn't come at it, so.
That was the beginning of the front.
I put that thing back, took it back apart and put it back of the boat, grabbed that little 6-footer.
It's just like you said. I mean, long poles can get heavy quite quickly, and something else to do. That's one of the things we've talked about many times is there's so many styles still, even with forward-facing sonar. to kind of develop your own taste for crappie fishing. And I've always loved that about, the different techniques and different styles, and always talking to guys, hey, man, what'd you do today? How'd you do it? And what was the pattern? And, the biggest thing is keep learning and making it work for you.
Right.
I told Joe after fishing with him this week, I fished a ACT tournament back in the spring down at Lake Darbone, Farmerville, Louisiana.
Yep.
I told Joe, I said, man, if I would have knew this, what I know now, then I think I would have did a lot better in that tournament, because them fish are so spooky down there that, and you see one at 40 foot, hit your trolling motor and get going at it, and then you'd have to let off your trolling motor, turn that live scope away from them so they wouldn't spook, and then turn it back real quick, and you see them, and if you pitch that jig out there with that long rod and it bloop, that was gone.
Well, there is applications. I mean, for using a long rod. Okay. Now, if those big trees, if you're fishing trees and they got a lot of branches and them fish are down in the tree, in the center of the, in the tree, then dipping a long rod down in there to get them, pull them out. You can't cast to that. I mean, you're going to get hung up. Now, if they're on top of something like, I had a 171 this week, and it was on a laydown. And I cast it over. The fish was laying down on top of the structure, so I cast it over there and brought it through and got him. So you can get them like that. You can if you're shooting out, okay. If you're shooting out and there's a tree there, I can rub either side of the tree and get the fish. You know what I mean? So, it doesn't stop you as long as there's not a lot of branches. But of course, I can get up there close with that short rod. As long as the fish aren't spooking, okay, you can get up there close with that short rod and you can drop it down in the tree. There's a way to do that. But if the fish get spooky, if they're out like 15, 20 feet, and
crappie do get spooky. I mean, we've all learned that now for sure.
Oh gosh, I mean, we were doing good in pre-fishing, and those fish shut down with this front in this tournament, this Wally's tournament here, and the fish that we were fishing at didn't want to eat. They didn't want to eat, so we had a lot of fish come up to it, look at it, sniff it. You know what I mean? They just weren't as aggressive as they were. We made a mistake on our first spot. We were on a bluff, and it was shaded. So the fish that we caught that afternoon before, they weren't there because they were warming up in those rocks. And I didn't even think about that, and we wasted about an hour and a half on that ledge fishing, but. Things like that when you're tournament fishing. I mean, these tournament, like me. I mean, I fish a lot of tournaments. Okay, he was talking about that Darbone tournament. I caught a 308 there. I had the big fish there. Pitching to them. Okay, but you learn so much fishing tournaments. Okay, from talking to different people how they did it and stuff like that, and you try to remember everything and bring it to your next tournament so that you're better and you do better. I'm real competitive and I want to win. I don't want to. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to do good. But
win or lose, you always learn something new at every one of these tournaments you go to.
Absolutely.
So we learn not to fish in the shade in the morning time when it's 24 degrees because it don't work.
That's actually a pretty cool scenario right there. Elaborate about that for a second.
Well. We didn't have a lot of great spots.
It could be easily overlooked.
Right. I mean, we didn't have a lot of great spots. You know what I mean? We had a little graph problem, and we didn't get to do exactly what we wanted to do. We wasted some time in one day of practice in an arm that didn't have fish in it. And then when we went to the spot, we didn't want to beat a plate. We went to another spot. We didn't want to beat it up. There was a lot of boats there. We figured there would be a lot of pressure on an area. Okay, and the bite would get tough. Okay,
right.
And those guys sometimes people are trying to build up confidence, and they're just wanting to catch fish, so they're confident in an area, but they end up staying in there too long, and hitting those fish and hooking those fish, and so then it's harder to catch them in the tournament, So we tried to go and find spots away from everybody, so that we were fishing for fish that hadn't been pressured bad, So you set up, when you're thinking about, trying to do good in the tournament, stuff like that, you go find you about 5 spots. and you or more, and then you go and try to put a plan together and do it. And after we got confident in that one place when we caught that big fish and caught some more, and we saw
So it was the scenario. There was an afternoon area.
right.
The rocks on the bluff was getting warmed up, and it was making the fish go to the. I mean, I wasn't there, so I'm kind of just feeding in
That's
with what I've
exactly.
gathered right now.
I was actually catching fish on the 5 foot down. Mm-hmm. I'd see something glowing over there on the bank. You know what I mean? And I would throw to it and work it. With my technique, I use a split shot and a jig. Okay, about a foot apart. All right.
Right.
And I shoot it like that, so that and I kick my scope up one notch. Okay, so that I see that splash. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot easier, especially when there's a lot of bait fish around and stuff like that. It's a lot easier to locate that bait when you got two things sinking down. A lot easier.
I agree.
Okay. So and instead of me shooting, I can put a split shot on and have a 124 jig. Okay. Instead of throwing a 1/8 at them.
What size split shot?
Number 7.
That's
But-
if he's
But it also
shooting to him. If he's shooting under a dock,
just
Okay.
jig, of course, just jig. So I have 2 rods set up. I have one set up for shooting docks, and then I have one for pitching.
Figured you had 6.
Huh?
Like guns.
I do have 6, but I mean, in case you get
Yeah.
tangled up, break off, whatever, for speed.
What kind of knot are you tying?
I do a double cinch.
Double cinch?
I do a double cinch. A lot of people think that you're going to have more action if you have a loop knot, or with a little space there, the jig moves more, But see, when I'm fishing and when I'm shooting, I actually flex my hand. Hand me the rod and I'll show it real quick. So a lot of people don't understand why I do this. They think I've got Tourette's or something like that. But anyway, so when I shoot it in there, I'll let the jig sink down in a dock, okay?
Yeah.
Just straight down. And then what I'll do is I'll be reeling real slow and I'll be flexing my hand like this, okay? Well, when I flex my hand, let me get this jig this off here, okay? So watch this real quick. Can you see that jig?
No.
Okay. So let's say, can you see the jig now?
You should be able to see if you point it right here where I'm at.
Okay. So watch this. All I'm going to do is, when I'm reeling, I'm flexing my hand. All I'm doing is flexing my hand. So that jig is jumping.
Yep.
So I'll let it sink to the bottom, and then I'll work it up the water column.
Yep.
If they don't hit it on the drop, okay, then I'll work it up. And when I'm flexing it, it's almost like the jig's probably coming up, staircasing it up. You know what I mean? But it's jumping. Now, if I find that the fish are high in the water column, okay, and they're up high, like 2 foot, 3 foot, 5 foot underneath the surface, then sometimes I'll just reel it real slow and come through them and bounce it a little bit. But the reason why I do that flexing is because I'm trying to make that jig look alive. Back in the day when we used to just go out there and dip with long rods on fork or whatever, you just go over there and dip it next to the tree and drop it down, and you hold it still.
Right.
And when I went down there with Russell Gates, Slab Nasty, and was fishing with him on fork, he'd say, just hold it still, hold it still. And then I'd start flexing it a little bit every once in a while, and I'd get bit, Well, that of course, that's before live, or forward fishing, you know what I mean? And we didn't really.
Live sonar?
Live. Yeah, and now you can see the fish, and you can just stick it right over top of his nose and see if you can get, activate him, get him going,
So I want to go through your standard setup from the pole to the reel to your line to your jig.
Okay. All right. So
A to Z. Your
A to Z.
setup.
A to Z. Okay. I use a short rod when I'm shooting docks, or when I'm
You're shooting.
casting. I'm shooting out in the open water, catching fish and stuff like that. So I use I prefer, of course, I helped design the 6-footer and the 6.6 for Huckabee rods.
What's the name of that?
The Crappie Ninja was the Ninja is the 6.6, and the 6-shooter is a 6-footer. Okay, so I use those. I use 4 to 6 pound test line. I use
What would you use 4 over 6?
Okay, the 4. The 4, okay, is you can shoot it farther.
Okay.
It drops quicker though.
Right.
Okay, but you can shoot it farther. and so that's why I use 4-pound test. Okay, so and if I'm not fishing in a tournament, okay, then and I'm guiding or just fishing, okay, I use the 4-pound test. When I fish in a tournament, sometimes I'm afraid, depending on which size fish we're catching. If I'm in Grenada, okay, then I'm going to use 6-pound test. Okay, it sinks slower.
Right.
All right. But I want to make sure I don't break off, because normally I boat flip. I don't hardly use a net. Okay.
Right.
Normally I boat flip. As long as when I'm bringing it up, I'll look to see if I've got a good hook set, and then I'll just lift that fish up in there. But
do you do a swing by, kind of like swing it past the boat and lift it, or sling it in, or straight ahead of you? The fish.
No, I just sling them in.
Okay.
I just sling them in. No, I don't, catch them. I mean,
Yeah.
I just sling them in the boat and then I deal with them.
Yeah.
I hold it up. You know what I mean? Hold it all. I don't want to get my new carpet messed up on my boat. But I'll hold them up anyway. So you use a smaller reel, of course. Ultralight reel. I have to
Spinner reel.
Spinner reel. Yeah, I use a spinner reel always. I don't use a push button. I use a
like a 200 series, 2000 series, or
like a 1000 series.
1000, real small.
1000, yeah, 1000. Fluger is what I use. Got 4-pound test line, 6-pound test line, depending on where I'm fishing at, what kind of fishing I'm doing.
What kind of line? You said line. Braid.
No, just like a what do you
Fluorocarbon.
call it fluoro, but it's
a copolymer.
Copolymer. I use that. I don't like a lot of memory. So memory hurts the distance, of course, on the shooting. So you got to use a line that's works good as far as low memory.
Is that why you don't use mono?
Yeah. Well, yes. Mono's got a lot of memory, I believe, so I don't want memory because you got to get that distance. You got to get back in there. Sometimes you're shooting 40 feet back in a dock, depending on how big the platform is, and that's where the fish might be back there, that far. They're not, they're not normally in the front in the sun. They're back there in that dark spot. But what else do we need to know about my setup? It's real basic.
What do you got on there?
As far as the jigs?
Yeah, what's at the end of the line?
Well, I mean, I use normally a 1/24 jig. I use I-hole jig heads, 1/16 and a 1/24.
What's I-hole?
I-hole jig was designed by Blake Phillips and his wife to put like a crappie nibble in the inserted.
There's a hollow East spot. Coast going out when it says
you got
that.
your jig head this big, and then there's a hollow spot in there, and then you tuck a crappie nibble in there.
Right.
And then it stays on there a long time. Whereas before, when we used to do that, you take the nibble and you'd stick it on the end of the on the
knock
hook,
it right off.
knock on the hook, and once you did anything, it'd knock it off.
Do you always use crappie nibbles?
I don't hardly ever use crappie nibbles. Not unless the bite is real bad, and I'm trying to stimulate a bite, I use.
So you have seen it make a difference?
I have seen it make a difference.
Okay.
There's a friend of mine over there in Georgia. He's got a scent called slab slobber. Okay, I spray that on jigs sometimes. I use a hair jig. I use a rubber bodied jig called sugar bugs. A friend of mine ties them and makes them over there in Georgia. I use thermocline lures on that I-hole jig head. I use Bayou Bob plastics. I mean, you get a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just building confidence up in a certain bait. And where that it's going to work. And you have confidence in it because you got to to tournament fish. You got to have a lot of confidence in what you're doing to be successful.
Like let's say a lake that has predominantly white crappie and one compared that has predominantly black crappie in there. Does your setup change any, or?
Well, my fishing does, because normally the blackfish are the ones under the docks, and that's what we have over there. Over in Georgia where I live, there's only one lake that has whitefish in it, so it's called Blackshear.
Why is that?
I don't know. They're not over there. It's sort of like down south in the southeast. There's no in Georgia and Florida and stuff like that, there's no smallmouth bass. It's got to be the temperature,
Right.
climate, and all that. But there's no. I don't know how they got into Lake Blackshear. I guess it depends on your river system and where it's coming from, and where it brings down the fish. Right, Todd? Wouldn't you think that?
Yeah,
Because the Flint River is the one that feeds Lake Blackshear.
Yeah.
But
and you remember when you came to Eufaula, you were blown away that we weren't catching any blackfish.
right. And so this lake here is. You were talking about what I decide how to fish. The docks, the blackfish were under, but they weren't as big as the whitefish.
Yep.
But they were on brush piles. But anyway, so the whitefish they're on structured trees and stuff like that. A lot of our lakes don't have trees anymore. They're older lakes. There's the blackfish will get on trees if there's trees in the lake, but
They like the piers.
they like them docks, especially in about six months out of the year. They're really good under there.
So January to July, or
They start
spring and fall.
They start. They get off the docks in the dead winter. Okay, in summertime.
Too cold.
Yeah, and then in the summertime it gets too hot, so they're getting out in the channels and stuff. So that's why I said the deeper docks are the more productive in the summertime. Because they're looking for that cooler water. They're looking for wherever the shad are. They follow the shad. When you get those open water fish though, like in October and November, the open water fish will be out there, and it's really fun to catch them like that. Because they'll get in little schools, 5 to 10 fish,
Yeah.
and they'll be they'll be 3 feet down.
Right.
And you'll just see that school up there, and they'll settle down, and you'll throw down in there and catch you one, and then they'll start moving, and then you follow the school and you can pick them off. It's pretty cool.
Well, I've had a blast. You guys got anything else you want to add to this?
I've got one thing.
I know you would.
So Joe came, 4 years ago out to Eufaula. And so we're talking about different techniques and how you really need to be good at all of it.
Yeah.
He gets in the boat with me and Ken, and we go out there. Our lake was high. It was 100 degrees, and there was fish in buckbrush. And you had to get it in the buckbrush. I'm talking live trees. And this dude was lost because short rod and everything else, and I'm dropping in the center of this stuff getting bit. Well, then we go out on the main lake on some laydowns, and we pulled up there, and remember I caught a few long poling,
Right.
but they were kind of skittish. And he said, let me, I said, okay. So he got up there, and he spot locked probably 40 feet away from that laydown. And I don't know how many you caught in a row, probably 40 in a row of, 3/4 pound to pound and a half fish cast into that laydown of fish that wouldn't bite when we were up on top
Right.
of them.
Shooting at that laydown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shooting. And so, even the same day on the same body of water, there was 2 completely different ways to catch them.
Two
Yes.
patterns going.
But neither one worked at all on the different spots.
Right. Exactly.
Buckbrush, you had to have a long rod and reach in there. But then once we got out on that laydown, if you weren't shooting to them and staying off of them like
Yep.
what he was doing,
Yep.
I couldn't catch them with the long rod.
Right.
I see that's one reason I started really casting to them in the summertime is you get that slick water out, and you get to a brush pile and it might be 100, 200 fish sitting on there. You might catch 1 or 2, but really quick they get educated. I say, hey man, Tom just got yanked out of here because this big object sitting on top of us making noise and casting this big shadow. That's the reason I have fell in love. Again, I know everybody thinks it's a long line, and I still love that technique as well, but I love casting to these fish.
Yeah, it's a blast. It's a blast.
It's really
and it's
fun.
less work.
Yeah.
Than a long rod.
Well,
It's
yeah.
a lot less work, so it's funner.
I got 2 people up front, and they're just slinging away, reeling in, slinging away. It's a fun day.
Yeah.
Hey,
But,
thank you guys for coming on here, and
I want to
can appreciate it.
thank Wally Marshall for putting
Yeah.
on this big tournament. It's always a blast. It's first class. Thank all my sponsors and stuff like that. I'm sorry we didn't do better in the tournament, but we'll get them next time.
That's it.
That's right.
Hey, like I said, hey, subscribe, like, and share what we're doing here because we're here for you guys. I'm not here for myself. I'm not here for anybody in this room. We're here for you guys listening and watching these things. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and comments.
Hey, yeah, and tell us in the comments what you want to hear about.
Yeah.
And shoot some docks.
Shoot some docks.
Have a blast.
All right. Till next time, Brad Chappell here.
Clint Pipes.
Joe Partenza, the Ninja.
Todd Huckabee.
There we go.
Holla.
Thank you.
About a mile from Big Muddy River, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel